Hello, everyone. Well, thank you all, first of all, for a little bit of that small introduction. And I would like to start with this presentation, which is geared towards those who not only dream of the future, but are also interested in embracing a better present. And let me present myself quickly. So I'm Diego Saldivar. I am a professor of interactive media at NOROF in Norway. And I participated beforehand in virtual reality projects for rehabilitation and biopsychological research. My main interests are neurogames, ludonarrative harmony, which I am going to be using to analyze Cyberpunk 2077, and minorities in games such as the LGBTQ community, the Muslim community, the Arab community, and other minorities. My contact information is below, but I will be opening it up again later on. And so without further ado, I continue. So what are we going to be talking about today? First of all, I will be talking about what is possible today with neurogames, what kinds of technologies we have, what possibilities are at hand today. Later, I want to talk about what we could do tomorrow or even next year with the technologies that we have available. And then I would like to discuss the best practices that we as an industry could be adopting or enforcing in many ways. And then I'll give about 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. And do rest assured that I will be giving handouts at the end of this presentation lecture so that you can check my sources if you want, because there may be some things you may want to go into further. And so let me start with that first state-of-the-art section, right? Now, for the purposes of this presentation, I will be defining neurogames as a digital game that interfaces directly with the brain as a form of a game mechanic. Now, to keep this presentation to the 25 minutes that I'm allocated, I will be only talking about the non-invasive devices that interface directly with the brain. So the Neuralink is not going to be talked about. And if we're being honest, I think very few hardcore gamers would undergo surgery just to have the latest Neuralink version, right? Also, the pictures I'm going to be showing is not just about concept art, it's the actual devices in use. So let's start with that demonstration. So I first want to talk about this wireless electroencephalogram controller that has been used for gaming for a little bit more than a decade. This specific example you see in the slide is showcasing MindLight, which is a game for health, which teaches students how to combat anxiety by using this electroencephalographic device, which when it comes to EEG devices that are used for research, you would usually have 64 to 128 electrodes with gel in your head. But the game consumer grade ones would have between 2 to 8 electrodes. Some of them can be dry, which makes them easier to wield. And yeah, that's how we start there, right? And then same year, but different technology. We see on the left, Dr. Rajesh Rao with an EEG cap, looking at a game without a controller. Whenever he wants to touch a button to shoot a rocket to defend a city, his partner on another building, Andres Tuco on the right, has his brain stimulated with transcranial magnetic stimulation for him to press a button even though he's not seeing any video game in front of him. So this is the first concept, proof of concept actually, that they published in 2014, yes, about brain-to-brain interfacing as rudimentary telepathy. They can only have one impulse or no impulse. Now let's continue with the next step they took, also in the University of Washington, same laboratory. We have we see them using transcranial magnetic stimulation that's to say neuromodulation, as a game mechanic, but for single players. Here you see the player who is looking at nothing. And whenever he sees nothing, he knows he has to press a button to go forward. And when he sees a flash of light, then he knows he has to press another button to go down the stairs. And the maze that he's working on is displayed behind him. And he has a 94% accuracy rate, which is COVID vaccine numbers. So it's very helpful, right? Let's go to another kind of application of neuromodulation. Same year, but we are talking about DARPA here, which is the United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, who in this case is using transcranial direct current stimulation to stimulate the frontal cortex of someone undergoing virtual piloting exercises in order to enhance their performance and learning. Some gamers have tried to replicate these kinds of benefits before with very little success, since they do not have a team of scientists properly placing the electrodes where they should be, right? We'll be talking about nootropics later on. Do make a note of that. Then, 2 years later, we have Dr. Kumar pictured using a device that gets the neuromotor impulses from his face in order to be able to decode them into speech. So he's speaking silently to the computer, and the computer speaks back to him using bone induction. So instead of having an earphone, there's vibrations that move his inner ear bones to making perceive sound. So he started with that. I personally like that model, but more recent models seem to look a little bit more transparent and lightweight. So yeah, that's still in development. Now, same year, similar technology, different application. We have the control labs with Dr. Reardon reading the neuromotor impulses coming right into the wrist to be able to interpret how the virtual hand should be posing or moving at all, right? But take this into account. It is not necessary for you to actually move your hand in order for the virtual hand to move. So you don't have to track hands anymore. You don't even have to move hands. As soon as the computer learns how your nervous impulses are trying to move the virtual hand, it's just going to learn from that. The newer versions they have, which they developed with Facebook Reality Labs, looks far sexier, but it's still in development, so you can only access it if you have a good reason to research. Then, 2 years later, this year actually, we have a new EEG device that's super lightweight, unobtrusive, and used right now for business research. It is pictured right there. Yep, it's just a pair of earphones. It's just as lightweight, just as nice. And they do have 2 electrodes dry, which do take the alpha, beta, and theta waves from the person, which are the same ones we saw in Mindlight. They basically try to see if you're stressed or relaxed, paying attention or not, and this in order to check for your productivity and safety in the workplace so far, which allows us to think about what could be possible in the following days, months, years, because this technology is already out there and it's obviously usable, and it has been demonstrated to be useful in game-like environments. So what should we be thinking of next? Well, the first and most obvious application is therapy and prosthetics. These researchers sell their ideas as such for funding. So yeah, we could make prosthetics and therapy easier, nicer with these new developments. And then, of course, we have the favorite of managers and lawmakers alike, just enhancing education as a nootropic, cognitive enhancers to make you think faster, quicker, stronger, to memorize with more accuracy. which would be opening a new world, a new era of learning, but also of cheating. So we should take that also into account. And of course, there's no technically games if we don't think about how we can use technology for gaming. So these technologies could really easily make games more immersive, more exciting, more powerful, more intense, if a little bit more expensive. But let's be real, games are a luxury, taking into account that there's millions of people who do not have access to clean water. But, you know, our games of the future could be this nice. And, well, new technology is not safe from consumerism. We can expect our telecommunications and publicity to adapt, to be to make the most out of these new channels of communication, right? And this can be for good and for bad. For very, very bad, actually, if you take into account that these new devices can open a door to new sort of intimacy, which can be violated and exploited for someone else's profit, both legally and illegally. Which brings me to our next best practices. Now that we have fantasized about what could be possible next year with the tools that we have today, I think we have to start thinking of how we as an industry and we as a society should tackle the advent of these new technologies. So it's not like nobody has done anything. You have, for instance, Facebook, who has this new responsible innovation principles, which they presented to me yesterday. This is a slide from yesterday's symposium on brain-computer interfaces and neuroethics in the University of Columbia, sorry. And they have taken strides to try to self-regulate when it comes to using neurotechnology. But we also have to take into account that governments should also step in and do the right thing to codify and strengthen neuro rights as part of human rights. And as of today, only Chile and Spain have codified neuro rights into their constitution. So yeah, we should be pushing forward for these new changes to occur, because we cannot trust that people will do the right thing at all times, as we can see, for instance, with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. So what can we as an industry start thinking about? And I would like to discuss this maybe in the Q&A session. So first of all, we have to have guardrails. So this slide is about the machines that interface with the brain to get data from it. So we should have designs that prevent hacking and tampering, like just hardwire it into the hardware, right? And this could be regulated or given a standard with laws enforcing privacy, safety, and responsible access. And I'm talking about responsible access specifically, because even though neuroethicists would talk about opening up the doors so that everyone could be using it indiscriminately, regardless of class or money, income, or race, or nationality. However, we do not allow children to drive cars, and we do not allow just anyone to pilot a plane. So we should be thinking, okay, what kind of responsible profile is necessary for the usage of this technology? And of course, this has to go around user-centric safety, autonomy, and transparency thoughts. We have to be transparent with what kind of data we get from our users, and they should be clearly informed, and frankly, so that they have the autonomy to opt in or out meaningfully. And of course, a favorite of mine is to standardize hardware specs, protocols, code, user interfaces, and user experience, kind of the PDF USB standard, so that we don't have many kinds of systems that are difficult to rig, but rather have, for instance, a Bluetooth system which could connect to 4 devices at the same time. And then I would like to talk about safeguards, safety and health, for devices that send information back into the brain, because we're talking about a very delicate organ. So this will be echoing my previous slides about hardwiring safeguards. to limit cognitive affectation. Whenever you send information into the brain, you will change how it works. So that should be there. We should also have automatic seizure and electric hazard protocols, which are medical standard anyway. We should have also thought about responsible access in particular. We should be limiting exposure for minors or have safety cutoffs. If you have been using this device for 1, 2, 3, 5 hours straight, then you stop having any kind of stimulation for 2, 3 days, right? Kind of like, are you still there? Are you still awake? Maybe take a break. We should also have truthful advertising. Yesterday, Ann Wexler, a neuroethicist, did complain about misleading information about neurotechnology, which is commercially available. So we should be truthful about what our neurotechnology for gaming can do, right? Maybe it won't make you more intelligent, but it will just make your gaming experience more immersive. And when it comes to also sending information back into the brain, you have to take into account live recalibration. You have to think, yeah, the brain is plastic. Things move physically inside the brain as we continue learning and adapting. So the machine has to use neural navigation to see where exactly it's supposed to be pointing back again. And so before I finish, I would like to just show my sources. For people on YouTube to be able to just click pause and be able to see this. Now, people will be given a handout with these sources as well in Discord. So just check the Discord channel, it should be there. And I am hoping that compression and streaming is not making these unreadable. But otherwise, I thank you very much for your attention. And now I will be opening the channel for the Q&A.
Wow. This technology is one of those things that is definitely amazing on one hand and super scary on the other, especially talking about writing into the brain effectively. I know the reading from the brain has been around in some form or another for decades, but yeah, it's fascinating. So questions. Lewis is asking about latency. What kind of latency are we talking about when we're reading and writing to the brain, if we can use the word latency in this context?
Yes, you can. And it depends on the technology you're using. When it comes to EEG, the latency is low enough. It also depends on if you're using gel to make the electrode interface directly into the skin. If you have hair and if it's dry, the latency and the noise will be higher. Just yesterday, I saw Kernel, a new technology that uses infrared light in order to be able to check the oxygen levels in the bloodstream in the brain, but that has a high latency because it takes some time for oxygen levels to reflect oxygen usage in an area of the brain, so it takes many seconds to be able to get any kind of information there. And so it just depends on the technology and how it's being used. Sometimes it takes, when I used one of these devices for a game demonstration, it took no more than a second for it to be able to read any changes in my stress or concentration levels. I remember this device, which was called Simibol, which also used, instead of neurofeedback, biofeedback, where they used your heart rate and your body temperature, which has a little bit of latency, yes, but it was the low latency between the device and the game also allowed me to be able to adjust on the fly, but it's usually no more than a second as well. And as we continue developing these technologies, latency should be lower and lower, and it should be wielder and easier to use. Yeah.
Is there a technology that we should be keeping our eye on at the moment that you're interested in, that's about to emerge, that you're really kind of thinking this might change stuff?
Yes, personally, I would go for Emotive MN8. Let me go back there so that you know exactly which one I'm talking about. Because I did present that right today. So that's a technology I think we should be taking the most we should really be tracking, because this is this close to being commercially available. I mean, if you want to get one of those, you have to sign lots of non-disclosure agreements, you have to pay a license, but it is available for research purposes. So I'm thinking this could be available in like 2 years. Let's say that by that time, Cyberpunk 2077 signs an agreement and they bundle the game with these earphones, basically, and they create a game mechanic which uses your brain waves in order to do a brain dance or whatever it is, right? So I think this one would be the one that will be the next step in consumer grade EEG devices, or well, neurotech devices.
Awesome. I think that's the end of our questions. Thank you so much, Diego. It's been
You're quite
super
welcome.
interesting.